grind culture. You got to grind. Yes, you do have to work hard. Absolutely. But you need to work hard at the things that are in alignment with you, right? You need to stop. We need to stop going after things and pulling life to you. Because if you're truly who you're meant to be, it shouldn't feel hard. There's hard times, but what I'm doing now doesn't feel hard.
I want to go into a bit of your story. You've got a pretty turbulent beginning, culminating with a moment, December 18, 2006, that you've talked about, broadly.
Yeah.
At this point, you attempted suicide. And we're going to go into, things that happened in childhood. I know you went to the military. That wasn't exactly what you thought it would be. Bodybuilding, looking for fame, all of those things I know led to that. But I think we're in this era of, I think there's a crisis of men, crisis of masculinity, right? Depression is half the rate of women, but suicide is 4 times. Men just don't talk about this shit, right? And then they end up doing the worst of the worst. So I'm trying to phrase this question. I was thinking about how to phrase this question, and hopefully it makes sense to you. How much of that evening, December 18, 2006, the culmination of it all, I know it's the trauma, but how much of it had to do with the pressure of simply being a man?
Oh, man. Probably most of it, to be honest with you. I mean, because it had to do with, as a man, that's a powerful question. Nobody's ever asked it to me that way. As a man, for me, I was looking for edification. It was this of being a man, right? Am I a man? I'm not good enough. There's not enough. I'm not big enough in bodybuilding. I'm not famous enough. And it was this constant line that was always being drawn for all men, right? To be better, to be stronger, to be faster. And yes, it did come from childhood trauma. But as I went into supposedly manhood, which I was a broken little boy, just in a man's body during that time. And so I would say 100% of it, because it had to do a lot of trauma with men specifically, and looking for that edification and kind of, looking for that attention, which a lot of men don't speak openly about, in our normal society right now. And especially with the advent of social media. Back then it wasn't as deep, but it's like you see these guys, everybody's grinding and everybody's millionaires and everybody's got Ferraris and Lamborghinis. So you're sitting at home on your couch comparing yourself to all these guys, but it's almost a false reality, right? And it was a false reality that I created in my head. That pushed me all the way to suicide. And it was, a lot of different things that led up to that. But I think almost 100% of it was being a man in the society, trying to live up to something.
What words would you use, or what descriptors would you give to how you defined what a man was up to that point back then? You crash obviously on the evening that you attempt to take your life, but what was a man to you? How did
To
you
me,
define it?
yeah, I kind of had a really convoluted thought of like intimacy, all this stuff. It was like I thought a man was the cars and the women and having the big houses and the things and a lot of material things. Like the more material things you could accomplish or the better your body looked, that's what represented a man. And I never really was taught truly how to be a man, to be honest with you. And so for me, I was just looking in the outside. I'm like, oh, that guy drives a nice car and he gets the women, or it's the nightclubs. And I wasn't that guy in high school. I kind of got rejected by women. I got picked on as a kid, little chubby as a kid. And so I saw those even to start in high school, man. I'd see the star athletes. I wasn't a good athlete in high school, so I never started in football or anything like that. And I'd see the star football player getting all the girls and all the edification. And so it was, to me, a man back then was the things that you could accumulate. And that made me keep chasing this thing that did not exist, that could never be fulfilled.
Crazy. How do you define it today?
Oh, man, make me cry, man. I'll define it in a story. So I was sitting in Peru just a year ago with a gentleman who's a coach of mine out there, sitting in a garden in Peru, smoking mupacho, looking at the mountains. And I said to myself, I'm the richest man in the world. My kids are healthy. My family's healthy. I get to travel and meet different people, friendships, deep friendships, experiences, being with my kids. The fact that I get to be with my kids makes me the richest man in the world. It's completely non-material now. It's the opposite. Not that I don't like material things. I absolutely love them, but it is no longer my identity. And true happiness and freedom to me is really knowing who I am. And that's what made me the freest, richest man in the world.
That evening that you did not end up taking your life, if I heard you right at one point, you said that that was almost as much as that sounds like, oh, thank goodness you didn't. For you, it was a self-fulfilling narrative in your head, further propagated that I can't even do this right. I can't even end my life right.
Yeah.
Can you take
Yeah.
me through that moment? Can you take me through
Yeah.
what do you mean? What did that mean and how did that change or at what point did that change for you?
Yeah, I'll share with you. So on December 18th, 2006, I had developed a massive opiate addiction. I had an injury about 4 years earlier, a small little leg injury, and I took an opiate, and back then it was that was a pandemic, the thing called epidemic, I guess it was.
Epidemic, yeah.
Yeah, epidemic, yeah. And so basically, I had taken an opiate, and I got this crazy feeling like of confidence. It was really interesting. I didn't care about the pain. I was like, wow, that was about 4 years earlier, and then it turned into like a lot of I was a clean cut dude, and then all of a sudden I started taking one Vicodin, two Vicodin, and then three Vicodin, then taking them to sleep, then taking them all day to 7 pills, and I transferred in 2006 to an injectable opiate, which was the destruction of me. It was a synthetic opiate called Nubane, and from 2006, well, it's July 2006. I was running my company. I had plenty of money in my bank account, and I was so high all the time that I had no idea my business was running into the ground. My main focus was getting opiates at that point. I became a functional opiate addict. I had I still have. She's a beautiful, almost 20-year-old woman now, but my daughter was 3 at the time. And try not to get emotional talk about this. On December 18th, 2006, I went to Walmart to buy some presents for her. And I remember I swiped my debit card and it declined. And then I swiped my credit card, it declined. And then I swiped all my business cards, it declined. And I was just like, I was so caught in the addiction. I didn't even know that I ran out of money completely. I go to the bank, I sit in front of a banker, and I'd never seen an overdrafted account. He turned my account, it was just all red. He's like, "You have no money, bro." He's like, "You're broke." And I was like, and all these like, and by that point, I'm pretty deep in my opiate addiction. Everything's falling apart, and this voice in my head was like, "It's over. The gig is over. Like everybody's gonna find out you're a loser. Everybody's gonna find out you're really not who you say you are. My father's gonna be disappointed. My mom's gonna be disappointed. I couldn't pay my rent. I was close to getting evicted from my apartment. And then when I went to my office, I set up like a blow up bed because I didn't want my parents to find me dead on the ground. I don't. That was the only thing I could think of. I was like, I just want because I knew my mom would come looking for me, and so locked my door in my office and. I loaded up massive amounts of opiates into the syringe, and I just kept pushing it into my vein. And I was like, and I finally started to black out. And I remember throwing the last needle as far as I could, just so it wouldn't be next to me. And that was it. I thought I died, and I got a phone call. Those Razor flip phones, if you remember, had the
I
little
do.
box in the front. It said, I heard this distinct ring, and I was like, I woke up, and I still, when I sat down, it said "mom" on the front of it, and I picked up the phone. And my mom and I have a great relationship. She's the classiest woman ever. She never cusses, but she said, "I don't know what the f is going on with you, but you need to read a book called The Secret." My mom had no idea she woke me up from an attempted suicide. She had no idea. And my first thought was, I can't even kill myself, right? So my subconscious was so deep and so dark that my conscious awareness couldn't even believe that I was supposed to be part of this reality. So immediately it was a negative thought, right? And then ironically, I went and got the book called The Secret. I'm still super high, and I go get this book and I sit down and I put we had the CV or the DV ROMs or whatever. I put it inside the computer and I started watching The Secret, and I'm like, for some reason, I really understood it. It was like, that's why I have it over my right shoulder here. It was like thoughts become things. And I'm like, huh, everything I asked for, I was in bodybuilding magazines. I wanted to be somewhat, I was doing well in bodybuilding, had a big bodybuilding company. And I was like, everything I asked for, I got. So it just came with the things that came with it, the drugs and the partying and all that stuff. And I'm like, what if I just reverse this? What if I reverse engineer this? Because I mean, I'm not dead. I'm still here. And so, I mean, so I was like, it was just a weird moment. And I'm like, what if I just reverse this? So from that moment on, I started doing I am affirmations. And that's how it started. Just reframing my thoughts about myself. So that's where I started after my suicide. It was just like, I just reframe my thoughts. But, it's so important. And the lesson in that is that our subconscious, right, which programmed from birth to 8 years old, is programming, right? I was operating off of the trauma and my programming from birth to 8 years old. And that was the programming that was showing up within my life, right? It was unconsciously making me do these behaviors. So I was like, wait a minute. So if I can rewire the computer system, then I can create new habits consciously and hopefully rewire the system. And that's what I've been doing for 17 years. I've been completely rewiring my whole system.
Do you recall what those affirmations were?
Oh yes, yes, yeah, I do 100%. So I went through a little quick, not quick. It was a long 2 years, but the 2 week detoxification. I mean, I just locked myself in my apartment. Probably shouldn't have done it alone, but I did. And then I remember I just would look in the mirror. I'm like, I am beautiful. I am strong. I am worthy. I am abundant. I would just say it, and I still say it every day. I'm beautiful. I'm strong. I'm worthy. I'm abundant. And I would look myself in the eyes, and then about 2 weeks later, I started to smile at myself, which is great. It makes me smile when I say it. I would smile at myself and I'd start laughing. And I'm like, wow, man, like this is working. Like you are beautiful. You are amazing. You are abundant. And then I went on a walk and it was so weird. I go on this walk and I see this flower. I'm like, that's a pretty flower. And I'm like, did I just say that's a pretty flower? I'd never in my life ever noticed a flower. And I was like, that's really pretty. And then I started noticing different things. I started to notice, and now I know 17 years later, it was a frequency change, right? I was operating in a different level of frequency. And so, yeah, I started doing those affirmations and then, I built vision boards and all that stuff. And, it's been a long journey, but that was how I started. I started to really I didn't know I was reprogramming my subconscious, through all the education and coaching I've gotten. I know that I basically rewrote the program in my brain.
Crazy. What were you doing on December 18th, 2007?
2000. Oh, I was at the bank, man. I got a job at the bank. Ended up getting a job as a banker, man, which is so weird. Like, and it just in the reality, it doesn't make any sense other than we are truly speaking things into existence. You're changing your frequency, and those opportunities come into that frequency, right? So I was like,
True. Yeah.
I got some shitty ass job at I was selling, like, at first I just needed a job, man. I was selling like advertisement to lawyers, like a boiler room. I was like, and I looked around the environment. I'm like, this is not the right environment. So I was like, environmentally, I need to change. So a mentor of mine who helped me through my suicide and stuff, he reached out to me and said, hey, I think I have a job for you. And I said, what, brother? He's like a banker. And I'm like, a banker? I'm like, I'm a military bodybuilder. Like, this makes no sense. He's like, just show up for the interview. So I go to Goodwill, and I think I still have the suit in my garage. I paid 50 cents for a suit at Goodwill, at thrift store. And I put the suit on. It was oversized. It looked pretty sloppy, but I cleaned it up and I got there. And her name was Lori Schmidt, man. And I was sitting across from her, and she interviews me, and I did all my affirmations. I created the vision about it. And at the end of the interview, I said to her, I said, listen, Lori, I said, and I know she remembers this. I said, if you hire me, I promise I'll be the best employee you've ever hired. I just need a job. So I leave and I'm thinking, man, I don't know if I got this. And she calls me like 15 minutes later. And this is a big part of my story the last 17 years. She said, hey, we're going to offer you the job. And I'm like, as what? Like, I'm thinking janitor. I'm like, cool, I'll do anything here. I have a 3-year-old daughter I need to take care of, and I'm getting my shit together. And she's like, we want to hire you as a banker. And I said, a banker? She's like, hey, we like your energy.
Mm.
I get chills on my body every time I say it. She says, we like your energy. And I'm like, I'm down. She's like, we can train you. We can give you the training, put you through all the schooling. And I said, okay. And I came on, and then I really adopted all those principles. So not only did I start doing the I am affirmations to reprogram the thought process, but you also have to reprogram the habits, because the habits come from the subconscious, right? So people reframe their thoughts. Like, you do I am affirmations, but then you have the same habits, you're creating the same environment, right? So I was like, I didn't even really know what I was doing. Like, I was so dangerous. I was dangerous enough to understand I am affirmations and being disciplined. And so I realized that by being disciplined and creating new habits, I actually rewired my brain. And I did, I didn't realize that. And so very quickly I moved up in the company. I think it was 2 years, 7 months, 28 days. I ended up moving up to like a VP position within the bank and retail banking. And then they ended up sending me CBA executive banking school. And I noticed there was like these waves of energy that, like, I would have these periods of just peace and prosperity. And then all of a sudden I'd crumble again. And I'm like, what is
Hmm.
going on? And what I realized is there was so much deep rooted trauma that I had to work through. And until I left the bank, I really realized what it was. Cause then I started to dive into more spirituality and understanding who I really am within this cosmic field, whatever this is we're experiencing. And so, yeah, it was the discipline and consistency. And I noticed too that other people around me were all about certifications and education. It was like, well, I'm educated, so therefore I should get this job. And I'm like, well, you're educated, but I'm more disciplined and consistent, and I'm operating in a different field of frequency. So based on your education, it doesn't mean you're going to get the job over me, because I'm doing, like, they would sit there and think that their education was getting next level. Instead, I would be working harder than them, right? I'd be more disciplined. I'd be more consistent. I kept getting these jobs, and every interview they'd be like, we like your energy. And I'm
Mm.
like, there's something to this energy field thing. So that's when I started to discover like energy and frequency. And then I really started to understand what it means. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean to operate in a different frequency?
Can we unpack that? Because that's something that I don't know that I can describe. I don't have like an elevator pitch for frequency, but I
Mm,
get it. I mean, on the low
yeah,
end, the simple end, it's and people generally get like, well, to hear 99.7 on the dial, you got to turn it to that, and the frequency
sure.
connection, you get all of that, right? So,
Yeah.
but how when you're talking to somebody, you're coaching somebody on
Mhm, mhm.
elevating frequency,
Yeah.
I'll just leave that in your lap. How do you
Yeah.
define that? How do you describe that? Whatever words you want to put to it. The key to life, it isn't money, it's happiness. And when you measure how happy you are, you actually become even more happy. Our friends at Gobundance, the Tribe of Millionaires, use a very specific tool to measure their happiness. It's called the Life Happiness Index, and you can have it too. Go over to gobundance.com/LHI and take your life happiness index assessment. You'll rate yourself in multiple categories on exactly how happy you are and get a custom output for you specifically that you can use in developing whatever goals you have for your life. GoBundance is the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. And the tool GoBundance members use at the base of all of that is the Life Happiness Index. Get out there and grab life big.
Yeah, well, so what we look at, so the highest level frequencies is authenticity, love, and gratitude. That's the highest level you can operate in, right? So if we look at our world, how much authenticity do you see and how much love and gratitude do you see? We see a lot of destruction, a lot of chaos, a lot of war, right? And if you go down the energy spectrum, you have hate, fear, jealousy, right? So when I look at someone's life, I say, okay, if they're wanting to improve, we look at the things that they're the people, places, things that they're seeing, things that they're hearing, which are all frequency, right? So, or the hearing is frequency. The things that you're seeing is creating some type of energy or thought process within your mind. So, if you want to operate in a different field or you want something different, you have to access that level of frequency. So, what I always tell people is if you want to be a millionaire, there's a millionaire version that exists of you, right? You have to feel already as if it exists, and that's changing the frequency. So for example, people say, well, I put a vision board out and I want to be a millionaire. Okay, the universe, or I call it, I believe in God. God's like, what do you mean? Like, you want to be a millionaire? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Well, I want to be a millionaire in what? Like, what do you want to do? You got to be really specific, number one. Then you can't create a vision board and put your hands under your butt and just sit there and wait for a Lamborghini to show up. Not only do you have to change the feeling and vibration within your body, just like I did. For example, well, I'll just explain my story by going and standing in the mirror and saying, "I am powerful, I am strong, I am beautiful, I am abundant," and saying it over and over again. It started to make my body believe it. The cells in my body started to believe that. Therefore, there was a different field that I was operating in, and those opportunities were in this field. I was down here. So when I started raising my field of frequency through the things I was seeing, the things that I was hearing, the things that I was eating, my ingesting food and exercise
Mhm.
and stuff, I started to operate in new fields of frequency. And I've been doing it for the last 17 years. It was like, okay, so now I keep telling people we're going to build $1 billion ecosystem. Like, whatever. I'm like, no, we are. It's already done. It's already embodied. I've already lived in that field. Every night I go to bed before a theta, like theta's in the morning, right when you get up and you go to bed. I operate in that field, and I'm very specific now. I'm like $1 billion ecosystem. I can see the schooling systems are creating, the financial literacy, the unwiring of indoctrination. I can see all the tools and resources it's providing. So now all I have to do is be disciplined and consistent in the things that match that frequency. So it's just a field that we operate in. And a way to look at it too is like what you'll hear a lot when you start to raise your frequency is, you're so different. You're so, and I'm like, yeah, thank God. like even 5 years ago, man, I had the biggest awakening probably last 5 to 6 years since I left corporate. I was a broken little boy that was manipulated by people that was even in corporate, man. My boss was constantly manipulating me, and like I was easily manipulated through other people's low self-esteem. So
Mhm.
if I was doing really well, I would, that's the old broken little boy inside, right? That's the subconscious. And so what I started to do is to understand what habits, people, places, things can I change within my life to access a new frequency. So for example, if I want $1 billion ecosystem, I have to be really specific, but what are the activities I have to do today in order to get there, right? I don't have to worry about the outcome. I have to worry about the activities I do, the things that I'm seeing, the things that I'm seeing, hearing, and the people that I'm around. And that's a frequency, right? And the way I explain too is you have I'll just make up a name, Susie, who everything happens to Susie, right? She wakes up in the
Mhm.
morning, she spills her coffee, she gets to the water cooler, and the friend comes over. It's like, "How you doing, Susie?" "Oh, my husband didn't put the toilet seat down." Blah blah blah, and everything. Susie's the one that gets fired. Susie's the one that's always in HR, and so, and then you have people like you and I that it's like, "Oh, Coach JV's so lucky." I'm like, "Well, I guess, yeah, you're right. I am lucky. I have a lot of amazing people around me." And the way that I can explain it is another story when I was in Peru. I was sitting in Peru in a garden. I go for 14 days once a year and I just disconnect completely from social, everything. I just completely disconnect and I sit in a garden in Peru and do some work. And I was sitting there. This was last year again, and I had this vision of myself. It was more of an energetic vision. I couldn't see myself, but I saw myself. Try to describe this. I saw myself dragging because I was really addicted to opiates. I mean, I was going into crack houses to get stuff. I mean, it was bad. And I'm
Yeah.
taking my 3-year-old daughter with me. I was a horrible father. Like I would, if you're an opiate addict, it doesn't matter. And so I was like, what the hell? And now here I'm sitting in Peru. My daughter's turning 19. She's going to turn 20 this year. She's amazing human being. She's just an amazing, beautiful lady. She lives with me. I have an amazing 8-year-old son. I have an amazing life. And I'm like, what was the difference between the crackhead me and the guy sitting in Peru who's financially free, spiritually free, and mentally free? There's somebody right now sitting in a crack house as I'm sitting in a garden in Peru. There's another me with a child, and I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
wow.
what's the difference? It was the discipline and consistency, accessing the new frequency for a long enough period of time. And then I access a new level of energy. Because where I was sitting, there's still somebody sitting in a crack house with their child. And I'm like, it was this epiphany moment for me. I have chills all over my body because I was like, all I did was ask that this version of me existed and that crackhead version of me still exists. Like, so for example, I tore my quad last year in May, and they prescribed me opiates. And I was like, oh my God.
Ooh.
So what did I do? This because once I was like I was like I needed it. I might tore the quad, and it was like, and ironically, how the universe represents things back to you. That's how I got injured the first time and went into opiate addiction. So here I am, 47 years old during that time. And I get this opiate. So what I did is this time I realized, okay, so being a recovering opiate addict a long time ago, I don't even identify with that, but now I'm presented with this again, right? And it's sitting on my counter. So what I did is I surrounded myself with people. I said, listen, I'm worried that I'm going to get addicted to these again. So I surrounded myself with a team. Like it literally was like, here, they would hand me one. It's like, here you go. Here's one to sleep at night. And that was it. And it's really important for people to understand that, because my point behind that is because I could go right back to that field once again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make
He
sense with
exists.
it?
You could realign with him, right?
One,
That guy that's out there.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can realign with any form you want. But the hardest part is when people think that it's like, okay, here you are, and this will bring it to because I always hear what I can hear what people are saying about this. It's like you're sitting here saying you want to be financially free, but then you have a late notice on your rent, and you're like, well,
Mhm.
how the hell am I gonna? I'm stressed out trying to pay my bills, but that's the whole indoctrination. They want us so stressed out trading time for money we don't have time to pay attention, right? And then we're paying for our attention. And so this is a whole frequency thing. So you have to trick your mind and get back. That's why Jesus says, again, in the kingdom, be like these lowly children, because children are pure subconscious. They're pure creation. They're 1 minute they're a superhero, 1 minute they're He-Man, G.I. Joe, right? My son is just turning 8 and he's starting to become conscious, right? So his programming was unbelievable. I've been programming him since he was a little baby in the womb. And now this kid has no lack, right? My daughter's different. She grew up, her first years of programming, I was a drug addict for the first 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
So I've had to reteach her and train her, but she's been able to see me go through this transition. And so what I want to say to people is, if you're sitting like, well, that's easy to say, JV, now where you're at. But it was a battle when I couldn't pay my bills to sit there and imagine myself in my dream home. But that's the key. It's imagination. It's your imagination, because it's not an outside in, it's inside out.
Yeah.
Everything is being created by someone's thought, right? So when I started to realize that, and now it's easier for me to talk about it now because now we're on the other side of it. Well, even
Sure.
4 years ago in COVID. They shut us down. They shut our business down. I lost all my money in COVID. I kept my crypto portfolio. Thank God. I was like, I'm not touching it. And I humbled myself. And I was like, I moved back with my parents. I lost everything. And I was like, so
Wow.
here I am back at my parents' house at 40, whatever that was, COVID 4 years ago already. Holy cow. So
Yeah.
here I am in my 40s, back at my parents' house. I leave a corporate job. Like my dad's like, in 2017. I told you so. So now I'm in their 1,000 square foot home. My kids and I move back in with them, right? So my dad's like, wow, it's like look the way I look and stuff. And he's just like, man, this guy ruined it. And so I would sit in the backyard and I would sit in the sun and I would imagine exactly where I'm at today. Exactly. And there was a moment where me and my mom were on a walk and we'd walk around the neighborhood and I looked her in the eyes, she had beautiful blue eyes. And I said, Mom, our lives will never be the same. And she goes, I believe you. And if one person believes in you, she's like, I believe you. She's like, I believe what you're saying. And my life isn't, it's completely different, but it's exactly what I was imagining.
Yeah.
Exactly what I was imagining. So that's the hardest part, being a spiritual being, having a physical experience, because we have to go through these experiences to transmute that darkness into light. It's like a slingshot. If you don't have, if the further you pull a slingshot back, the further the rock's going to go.
Yeah.
Right. So if
Yeah.
someone's really deep right now, know that you can ascend really high. Does that make sense?
It does. It's
Yeah.
the bow and arrow, right? Like in
Mm.
order for the arrow to shoot forward, is it with as much aggression and pain and power as possible, you've got to draw back, right? There's got to be
Hard.
the draw back, and it gets harder, and it gets
Yep.
deeper, and it gets it's a strain because you keep going further and further back. But the moment that you do release, whatever that is, to your point, you learn the power of affirmation, the power of changing your frequency, changing your state, building
Mhm.
belief in the future version of you. When you let go with all that torque, the
Mm.
arrow you is going to shoot forward even with more power and more fervor and go further than maybe it would if you weren't as deep as you were. To me, it's the ultimate in life happening for you versus to you when you're in the
Yes.
depths, right?
Yes. Yeah,
That-
yeah, and it's all a choice, and, like, I follow Jesus, I love the life, I just love Jesus. I just love the story, I love the teachings, and, like, for Jesus, like, think about, to me, the representation of disciples. He took undisciplined people and made them disciplined. That's what a disciple is. And
yeah,
then he was like, "Hey guys, I'm gonna go fast for 40 days and 40 nights. Now you're gonna heal people." He was telling the people, he was like, "I can't heal you if you don't believe in yourself." He's like, he tells the guy, "Hey," the guy's sitting on a mat waiting for a fountain, waiting for some savior to come, right? And the guy that was on his mat, and he goes up to him, he says, "Hey, do you want to be saved?" The
right.
guy's like, "Yes." He goes, "And take your mat and walk." And that's my story. That's my simple story to everybody. It's like we have to pick a president coming back is not going to save you. Trump or if Biden stays, whatever your belief system is he, she, it is not going to wake you up in the morning to go to the gym. He, she, it is not going to make your financial decisions for you to invest. So when I realized that I have sovereignty of my life and the present CEO, so present CEO is God for me. And then I say I'm Jesus's running mate. For me, I'm like, hey, I go to him for answers. I go to Jesus for guidance. And then so I just keep rolling. And it's like, and I realized too, it's like, I am creating all this stuff. I am. I am creating all this stuff. And another very powerful, I want to give credit to Bob Proctor, rest his soul. Like, he was one of
Yeah,
my favorite. So I've been saying this since 2009, and it's interesting. This is where it comes in, where you got to say the same things over and over again, because there's a lot of rewiring. So I've been saying since 2009, I'm so happy and grateful for the money that comes to me in increasing quantities from multiple sources on a continuous basis. I got that from Bob Proctor. Well, I've been saying that since 2009 while I was in a corporate job, and they wouldn't really let me have a business out. It was kind of taboo to have a business outside of your VP job or whatever. And so I ended up, I was like on this journey that I left the bank in 2017. Now the paradigm I live in, I'm so happy and grateful for the money that comes to me. Every quarter, my money increases from multiple sources. We have 7 different ecosystems, and I'm like, oh my God, it worked. But I
mm,
had to say it every single day, because there's deep rooted epigenetics. Now, epi is different. Epi is outside. Like, people think genetic, right? Epigenetic is it's more quantum, right? Epigenetic. When I go to Peru, we work on epigenetics. Epigenetics is your belief system. It's like the quantum field that your thoughts become epigenetic, where you can transform. Like, my timeline, even though I came from my dad and my mother, I drew a line in the sand. The epigenetics are going to go down into the genetics of my family. Like, my son will be wealthy, my daughter will be wealthy. And I'm not talking about just money, I'm talking about mentally, right? So I think it's an important thing around epigenetics to really rewire your thought system.
Amazing, amazing. It's funny, you go back to the corporate thing, we share that to some extent. My story is a little bit more recent, but, 2017, I get the big job, but unfortunately it came with the wrong boss or maybe the right boss, depending on what, which way we
Yeah.
wanna look at it. But, who yeah, I found myself even though she continually would, remind me that who I am as a person will never be enough
Mm,
for her. Even though she continued to remind me of that, I couldn't help but want to seek her approval. Even up to the day that I quit. I quit
yes.
in 2021, so 3 years ago, almost to the day actually,
Mhm.
March 13th. Today's March 18th as we talk. I walked in and I quit. Walked in. It was COVID, so I
Sure.
got on Teams and said, "I need to call you so that I could quit." But even
Yeah.
then, I was so worried about what she was gonna think about me.
Mm,
What's interesting today is that there's an element to my drive, ambition, desire that exists in proving her wrong. I don't know if
mm,
that's healthy or not, but I have this chip on my shoulder to some extent that while I'm over the idea that I need her approval, now it's almost like fuck you, and
mm.
I live with that. If that makes sense. So I wanted to go back real quick to authenticity.
Yeah.
One of the three. You talked about authenticity, love, and gratitude.
Yeah.
Something I've worked on a lot over the last 3 years is my relationship with my ego.
Mm,
At one point, I would have said that authentic self and ego were two different things. Ego did not belong in the room with authentic self.
mm.
But I would say today, no, it's a component of who I am. It's a component of who we all are. It's a
100%.
necessary piece of us. It's
Yep.
authentic. Talk about your ego, how you define it,
Mm.
how it shows up right now in all that you're doing. You mentioned about, authenticity, love, gratitude. How is your ego? How does it fuel who you are authentically?
Yeah, I love this question. So, the ego steps into play. So, basically, I'll start with the foundation of what we created. So, one of the things I read the book Ray Dalio's Principles, and from then I developed principles. So, I'll share with you where my ego comes into play. So, my
Please.
if I would have had this type of wealth 5 years ago, I'd been destroyed. If I would have had this type of wealth 2016, I'd be dead, or 2006, I'd be dead. And me and my mom
Sure.
talk about that. Like, this is happening at the right time because when I finally defined principles, so I'll explain this. So what I did is for my business and for my life. So for my personal life. So business integrity, honesty, and uncompromising belief in God for me. You can believe in whatever you want at my company. You can talk about religion, you can talk about that stuff, but just don't tell me I can't believe in God, right? So that's it. You can be who you want to be. And my team knows that. So integrity, honesty, and uncompromised belief in God. Then I developed principles with my family that I express in my team. So it's peace, freedom, and family structure. So where my ego comes into play. So if you disrupt my peace, my freedom, or my family structure, it's a hard no. I won't do business with you. I'm not going to be on meetings at 5 o'clock. I won't work on weekends. And you know that maybe in this grind culture it doesn't work, but it's worked for me because I'm very
Yeah.
stern on my principles. Now, where my ego comes into play is if anything pushes me outside of alignment of that. So, for example, if you mess with my family, my people, my ecosystem, my ego comes out to protect them, right? So my ego comes out in protection of my ecosystem and my family and my partner and my kids, and that's where my ego plays a part. My ego also plays a part in pushing me to because for me, I put myself in stressful situations all the time, stress my body in order to keep for example, like ice baths, high intensity training. I have a coach for high intensity training. I have a coach for ice baths. I have a coach for pretty much everything. And so what I always constantly do is my ego plays a part in that. Right. And so that's where I express my ego is through those things. But I also think the ego is very important. I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't have an ego. Right. And I think where the
True.
ego goes wrong is when we are doing things out of spite or in order to hurt somebody else. And what happens though is when you become your true authentic self, we're experiencing this now is haters come out of the woodwork, man. It's a weird, weird dynamic. So I'll say it this way. When I was looking for everybody, I found nobody. When I found me, everybody found me.
Mm.
So when I was looking, this was 5 years ago. I was looking for when 2018. Yes, that was 5 years ago. And I was looking in 2018. I left corporate America. It wasn't working out. I lost everything, man. It was like I wrote a book. I started a podcast. I thought I was doing very good as an executive. And I went into this new world of entrepreneurship. Now I'd been an entrepreneur before, but I wasn't that good at it. The bodybuilding company was just fitness company, and so I leave and I start these companies or the company, and nobody was signing up for my programs. Nobody was listening and I was faking it until I made it, right? And I was like, oh, doing the grind on social and doing all this stuff. And unbeknownst to people, I was driving fucking Uber at night, man. I was like, dude, it's not working out. My 401k was draining. I spent my whole 401k on the business. I spent all my savings. I sold my dream home to keep the business going, to keep the facade alive. And it was early 2018. I remember I was driving Uber at night. I was exhausted, man, working 19 hours a day. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to start showing people that I'm driving Uber. Like, shit sucks, man. And so I started doing stories. I was like, guys, shit ain't working out, man, but here's what I'm going to do. And then lo and behold, it starts to work out. We actually build a really robust warrior academy. And then all of a sudden the pandemic shuts us down. Right. So here I am. I have this choice. I end up on my parents' couch. I had this, I kept my crypto portfolio, thank God, because I was like, I'm not touching that. And I said to myself, I said, I'm going to take people from me ending up on my parents' couch at 40 all the way to $1 billion ecosystem. So I started being authentic, like truly. What it did for me, though, personally, is all my shit's out there now.
Yeah.
It's like, you remember when Eminem did the rap battle and he told on himself? Like, and then the dude was like, that's what I basically did. I was like, listen, I'm a former drug addict. I've lost my money 3 times. I'm broke on my parents' couch. I feel like a loser right now, but here's the things that I am going to do. And I'm actually going to document this on social. So I'm out here telling people all the research that I'm doing and building. And I took people through the journey, and that authenticity exploded our company.
Yeah.
Like, people were like, hey, I can feel your authenticity. And that, it did take ego though to get off my parents' couch, man. I'm telling you, it's like, because when I'm sitting there, my pops is looking at me like, yeah, you loser, right? Here you are. I told you so. You should have stayed in your corporate job, your 401k, your health insurance. And I let that drive me every day, not out of spite though, out of knowing what was possible for me. And I think that's what's transitioned for me, is that I am now thankful for all the people that did the things they did to me, because they're the reason why I am who I am today. So for me, I found extreme gratitude for my old boss. I found extreme gratitude for all the people that betrayed me and people that stole from me and things like that, because each of those lessons were the darkness that I transmuted into light that made me more powerful and made me stronger, right? And I realized too, I'm like, this is an interesting thing, and this might be going too far or deep into this, but I love God. I talk about that. So I had to build an ecosystem because I talk about God and Jesus all the time. I'm like, people are like, you shouldn't talk about God and finances. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, so it's like I get a lot of hate around that. You talk about Jesus and finances. I'm like, whatever. And so I was sitting there with a spiritual coach, and he was like, listen, I said, who is God? And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, you know who God is. And we're sitting out there in the forest, just we're like sitting with God, just hanging out and just talking. He's like, you know who God is. And he keeps looking me in the eyes. And I'm like, who's God? He said, let me ask you a question. He said, how does God, he goes, do you believe God is perfect? Do you believe Jesus was perfect? I said, yes. And he said, how does God know that though? And I said, he looked me in the eyes. He goes, how does God know that? He said, what if God wanted to know he's perfect through you and your imperfections? So you came here, God came through us to experience imperfection, to realize that he's perfect and to transmute his darkness into light. And he said, so we're not saying we're God, but let's pretend for a moment that every person you're looking at is God experiencing imperfection. How would you look at humanity differently? So
Holy shit.
I started looking at everybody differently. So I
Yeah.
look at you as God's creation, and I'm like, if I don't like something in you, then it tells me I need to work on it in myself. And I was like, wow. So I started to look at everybody as a mere reflection. Then it goes back to frequency. So if everything in my paradigm, everything's happening to me, like you said, there's shitty people in my life all the time. That's me. I'm attracting that. It's a mere reflection of God. That's how I'm showing up for God. And so, so my life, how I've been living, the biggest transition I've had is the last 24 months. And for me, I'm like, every day I pray, I'm like, God, please help me show up the way you want me to show up within your ecosystem. That's all I'm asking you to do. And then I step in faith. And that goes into the whole manifestation and faith and all this stuff. And it's just an interesting dynamic, because it's like, but ego plays a part in that, because we wouldn't have anything if we didn't have ego. And we wouldn't have anything if we didn't desire. People are like, you shouldn't desire for money. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you shouldn't desire for a wealth or a new car. Why can't you? That's the whole human experience, is desire. It's when desire is mixed with greed and hate and jealousy and anger. But if you have desire to experience a Lamborghini Aventador because of the creation of it and the sound of the muffler, and you love cars, there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with it is if I bought it in 2006 to 2017, I would have bought it to tell the world to fuck off.
Mm,
Right? But
yeah,
now I would buy one because me and my son love cars. Like we love cars. We love, we go to car shows, and it's like, that's our dream cars, of a Lamborghini Aventador. And how fucking cool would that be? Pulling up to my son's school because we love cars.
yeah,
Not because it's F you dads that you can't afford this. It's like, hey, I worked hard for this, and me and my son get to experience the stitching and the wheel, and like things like that. And so it's like it goes into that balance. And then again, too, it's like everybody's created different. Every single person has a different DNA and a different fingerprint. And so we're all arguing back and forth about our opinions, but your opinion is yours. Like that's what you created. That's your living experience. So when haters come at me, I'm like, okay, I love you, because I have no idea how they grew up or what paradigm they're coming from. I mean, the stuff I'm speaking could be complete blasphemy to them, but why would I spend an ounce of my energy trying to prove them right?
yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
It's a slippery slope, and that's
I
why.
sh I struggle with that one.
Well,
I sh yeah,
that's why I committed suicide, man, because I was trying to prove these men in my life and these dudes that would make fun of me in high school. It's like, and I found out nobody gives a fuck. None of them care, and it's funny because people make fun. I wear the same shit every day, and I'm like, it's simple to me. I don't care, man. I don't care. I don't care. I wear Birkenstocks, and half the time I don't wear shoes, and I'm like, people are like, I'll show up to meetings, like big business meetings like this, and I'm just like, and some of them they'll judge you. They're like, "Who's this guy?" I'm like, "Hey, if you
yeah,
don't want to do business, this is who I am, man. Like, I am not dressing up for you, because what is like this whole look of success, and you got to dress to impress? It's like, no, you got to be a good fucking person, man.
yeah. No,
Like,
I
be a good."
completely agree. I
Yeah,
completely
so,
agree. And to your
yeah.
point, that's where I worry that, where does the line get drawn for me? Like, prove somebody wrong, little chip on the shoulder. I think that could be okay. Maybe it's not like I don't wish harm on that individual, but just she's represents. But to your point, the other side of that is I get too fanatical about this person's judgment and allow that to drive
Mm.
my decisions. And that's the line I'm trying to always walk, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%, and what I started to realize too is that, um, they we're thinking about it, but they probably aren't. That's one
Yeah,
of the things
no,
I think about.
not
Yeah, yeah,
now.
it's like, yeah, and so that, like, and
I'm
there
not a
always has
fraud.
to be some sort of I mean, that's again, how does God know he's perfect?
Yeah.
For us to be here and go through those things. Like for I'll give you an example. I had a really, really rough weekend. There was, I have haters, but when a hater, I've never been doxxed before. They put my a very personal one of my personal addresses out on the internet. And I
Oh,
was like, yeah. So it's like I lost my effing mind, brother. Like I lost my effing mind. That's when my ego came out. It was like, Now you're effing with my family, man." And that's where ego comes into play. It was like,
yeah,
I will, you hurt my family. And it was like, and he fixed it right away. And I was like, but I was like, that's where I saw my ego come out, because you're messing with my peace, my freedom, and my family structure. And that's what I always share with men that I coach. I'm like, you got to have principles, man. Principles, morals, and ethics. And what I mean by that is define principles that you can measure all your decisions off of. Like every time I make a decision because we have this ecosystem now. We have, over 27 team members all, over the world. We have this big ecosystem, and I'm like, my decisions are so important now. I'm not affecting myself anymore, right? If I make a poor decision for business, or for if I, drink and drive and I get a DUI or I get in a wreck, every decision I make. So when I go to make a decision, even simple as if I'm out at a restaurant and I'm like, okay, is this going to disrupt my peace, freedom, or family structure? If I'm going to have a drink, I'm going to get a drive. I'm going to make sure that I have it. Like my brain is always thinking about my principles. And I think it's really important for specifically men these days to develop principles, right? We really got to get back to that.
is there a can you how do I put this? Are there bad principles? Like if you're coaching somebody on developing principles, can you outline principles in good faith and they're just like the wrong principles or bad principles? Like how do
Mm,
you warn somebody off or coach somebody through establishing principles that aren't really the principles they should be establishing, if that even exists?
I don't even know if it exists, because I don't think you can tell another human being what their principles can be,
I
because
like
that's
that.
the reality they have to live.
Yeah.
Like, if a principle is like to get money, to get women, and to party every weekend, Well, guess what? There's equal or lesser reaction to that. So your principles will supersede you. Those principles will come true.
Yeah.
Right. And if you look at my life, it's amazing because we run these businesses together. We have a group, Freedom Asset Management Group, our team, and my CFO, my COO, and the CEO of one of our other companies, they know that after 2 o'clock, I don't work. And now a lot of people would hear this and, in the grind culture and this, that's one thing I want to talk about too in social. It's like this grind culture. You got to grind. Yes, you do have to work hard. Absolutely. But you need to work hard at the things that are in alignment with you.
Yeah.
Right. That's you need to stop. We need to stop going after things and pulling life to you. Because if you're truly who you're meant to be, it shouldn't feel hard. There's hard times, but what I'm doing now doesn't feel hard. It feels very fulfilling, very stressful. But I wake up every day. There's not one day I wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. Right. So it's pulling life to you by becoming the frequency, by becoming the identity
Yeah.
versus trying to become something, if that makes sense.
It does. Stress gets a bad rap, I think, in some ways. You need stress in order
Oh,
for
yeah.
growth. I mean, that's what you do with the body when you're working out, right? There's stress.
Mhm.
You do it with your mind when you're learning
Yep.
something new. You're stressing the mind, right? I think you can always, like anything, you can go too far. But it's funny you mentioned about you're in alignment. You feel like the activities are worthy activities. Like so, as a newer entrepreneur, 3 years
Mhm.
in, I've had success. I've been
That's
fortunate to
awesome.
have success, even make more than what I made my last year, which was 400
Amazing.
grand. My last year at my
Amazing.
company. So, right. That said, I don't think I've truly defined my principles. And it's
Mm,
leading to this place where the stress is getting a little overwhelming. And it's not
mm.
even, it's not, it's funny because it's like I have a lot of perceived stress and we'll talk about this fear of success. I think of like, what if I can't
Oh my
maintain
gosh.
this? I know you
Yes.
talk about that a lot. We can get into that. But I
Yeah.
just went up, I told you, I went up to South Florida and I flew into Fort Lauderdale and I drove over to Fort Myers. I interviewed Tito Ortiz and a couple
Yeah.
other people and then drove back. So through Alligator Alley, if anybody's listening and knows that in Florida, it's just like kind
Mm.
of a no man's land of, I guess, anacondas. If you
Yeah.
anacondas and alligators, right? But it's a highway. But like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just it's the Everglades. Like it's a
Yeah.
highway through the Everglades.
Sure.
But on that trip, I intentionally didn't answer a phone call, make a phone call, or do anything. Right? Like normally on a drive, I'd listen to a podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
I put on some music just to like let my brain the same song over and over and over again. It was called "To Be a
Mhm.
Man." Great song by Dax. So that song was just
Yes.
going,
Yes.
and
Great song.
I'm driving back and forth, and my mind was in the space of like, God, I, I I'm doing a lot of things. And if I were to audit my calendar, I don't know that like you said, like I'm working hard,
Mm.
but I'm working so hard doing so many different things. Like I probably don't need to. If I look at like where's my income coming from and where's
Yeah.
the success I'm having and what are the activities aligned with that,
Yeah.
I would probably have the same or better result than I have right now as
Mhm.
far as like income and or wealth
Mhm.
with a third of the effort. Meaning there's a
Yes.
lot of shit on my calendar that doesn't need to be there. There's a lot of commitments I've made in the hope of something that don't
Mhm.
need to be there, at least not right now. So I'm going through that process. So I wanted to ask you because you uttered
Yeah.
Bob Proctor. Remind me to get back to fear of success. I want to get back to that, but on
Sounds
this
good.
point, you
Cool.
uttered Bob Proctor, and one of the most amazing teachings I've heard of Bob Proctor that he's talked about is the law of vacuum or vacuum law of prosperity. I always screw that up. Vacuum law of prosperity.
Mm.
The way you put it essentially is you have to lose something to gain something. That's
Correct.
the vacuum law of prosperity. Create a vacuum for the prosperity that you want. Where you are right now, you're blowing up on all these social platforms. Your
Mm.
business is growing every quarter. Revenue's going up.
Mhm.
Quarter over quarter, so on and so forth. You feel in alignment. All good.
Mhm.
What do you need to lose in order to gain whatever it is you haven't yet? What are you sitting on right now that needs to not be there anymore in order for you to gain the next level of whatever that might be?
Hmm. We've gone through that process. Yeah. I'll share with you what had to we call it moving the needle forward activities. So what we did is we were doing a lot of stuff too. We were doing a lot of stuff. For example, we had 9 companies and it didn't
Real quick,
I
keep
yeah,
this thought. I want to make sure because if I'm listening to this, I'm
yeah,
like, what are these companies? You have an
yeah,
insurance company, you've got a
yeah.
mastermind. Could you just real quick run through, kind of
Yeah,
give us
yeah.
an
So we
idea?
had, and so we had 9, but we went through this process of moving the needle forward. Like we just have a bunch of we just had we were starting to create companies out of ego. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, we can do more companies, and people kept asking us for our business scaling skills, right? So now we're down to 7. So we have the insurance company, we had a supplement company. We actually, so we're down to 6. We just shut that down because it was like, why are we doing it? Like, why do we had a supplement, we have a fitness brand. So we 3T Warrior Academy, we have mid-tier coaching program, a high-tier coaching program. We have an insurance company, have a beard company, a beard oil, a Freedom Asset Management Group. And so we had all these things that we were doing, right? Oh, we have Merlin, the smartest way to track your crypto, Blockheads, which owns Merlin. And so what we were doing was, it was this, because we finally had success, and we're like, success. And again, we're going into that edification thing. It was like, oh, look at me. I have all these businesses. I have all these companies. And it was
Yeah.
like, we were doing so much and we weren't going anywhere. And so we
Yeah.
finally had a heart-to-heart meeting, and we're like, listen, dude, what is moving the needle forward? Like, what are we? What are we? Right. And so we defined who we were. We built out our company, our 5 pillars of wealth. And then we built our principles. And then from there, we just started cutting things. We cutted partnerships, we cutted relationships, we cut all this stuff. And we whittled down to we call it the needle moving forward activities. That's it. And so I defined who I was. I'm like, and I'm the CEO. And then I had all these team members. So what I did is I brought on a COO and a CFO. And I was like, because I'm operating in all these different things, which makes no sense as a CEO. And so what we did is we truly put me into a CEO position. So now I do interviews. My job is to get us in front of as many people as possible. Now that's my job, right? To
Mm.
get our brand out there and to go speak and to spread our mission. And now I have a CFO and CEO. So what would I need to get rid of at this point is, which is interesting. What I am doing is I'm actually what now I'm doing now is I'm spreading my income out to more people so that I can be freer, if that makes sense. So like,
Yeah.
instead of,
Yeah.
but actually when I do that, I become wealthier. It's the opposite dynamic. So that was a transition I went through from, it was scary, from 2023 to 2020. I started giving my income to a COO, a CFO, and I started to empower other people and started paying people very well. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to end up going broke again. And it did the complete opposite. By empowering other people and paying them very, very well, my wealth just started, because now I duplicated myself.
Yeah.
Right. So the things that I think we're in a good space right now, because it's like, I truly am. I'm free. I can travel where I want. I need a microphone and a computer, and that's all. So I think the biggest thing for people is, like you said, you have to give up something, and that's a hard thing to do too, because as people go through these awakening process, sometimes we want to hold on to the old self, right? It's like we want to hold on to the old relationships. We want to hold on, and then when people say to you, "You're so different," it hurts your feelings, man. You're like, well, but I started saying to people, like, I've had this happen to me every single year because I'm constantly working on myself. I'm that's one of my biggest things. Like, I'm a self development junkie, but not just a junkie where I'm like, I'm actually practicing this stuff, right? I'm moving forward. And so last time somebody said that to me, it kind of pissed me off. My ego came out, and I said, well, is it that I'm different or you haven't changed? And
Ooh.
they were like, yeah, that's what they said. They were like, "Oh," and I was just on a Zoom call. I was like, "You're talking all this shit behind my back." I said, so we have a rule in our company. If you talk about somebody twice behind their back, you want attention, you don't want a solution. So if you talk about somebody twice in our company, you have to talk to the person's face. So if anybody in our organization hears somebody talk about somebody twice, we think they want attention, and we don't deal with people like that. So this person kept talking behind my back. And so I was like, it was more than twice, 3, 4, 5 times. So I'm like, "Hey, let's jump on a Zoom." I got on, I said, "What's up? You're so different, man. Like, you focus on a lot of wealth stuff, and you used to focus on mindset." I'm like, nothing's changed, dude. My knowledge has changed. I'm still the same spiritual guy. I said, I love macroeconomics. I love building wealth. I love helping people break that indoctrination paradigm. So why wouldn't I talk about it?
Mm.
And I said, the question is, you may have not changed. And he was like, oh shit. I said, you're in the exact same spot, complaining about the exact same shit. And I said, "And you're behind my back talking about how much I changed." I go, "Why don't you change with me, man? Why don't we do something?" It was just like a powerful thing. And so that holds people back, though.
Mm.
That really holds people back. The fear of losing people when you change, because
Yeah.
you will lose people. And that's a scary thing, especially, it could be family members. It could be, and if your intentions are good and you're not the one, it's not like saying, "Hey, you're not in my life anymore." People will remove themselves from your life, which is said, that part I have not, because I cheer for people, man. Like, if someone's winning, I'm like, let's go. Right. I've never really been a person to like hate on somebody. I've been there before where I'm a hater, but I mean, secretly sometimes, but I do cheer for people. I'm like, I just had never understood that paradigm. But yeah, so so a lot of people don't realize you have to, like, for example, to build what I built, I had to give up a lot of personal time to get to where I'm at. But now I have more personal time than I could ever imagine.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I like
Yeah.
that. I love that you said it really well. You gave us some income, COO, CFO, in order to scale and grow and get back to your principles, what you want, family
Yes.
structure, peace, freedom, right? Like, so
Yeah.
giving up some money allows you to align with those principles, and having those principles defined is everything. I love that. I want to get into crypto and macroeconomics here in a moment, but one last piece before we pivot to that is fear of success.
Mm.
It's hard for me, again, kind of going back to the concept of frequency.
Mhm.
Hard for me to articulate that, but I sense it, I feel it, even from
Yep.
especially for me. I should say even for me, especially for me, right? Myself, but I can sense, like, when something's about to happen, I stop taking action toward it, right? Like,
Mm.
oh wow, all the things that here's an example. This is a great example. So I'm here in DR. I
Okay.
start talking about being in the Dominican Republic, and boom, my brand blows up on Instagram specific
Yeah.
to that. And I have all these people asking about, where would you invest there? Where would you live there? Da 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 da, da, right? So along comes some advice from a really cool guy, Evan Carmichael, who's a big YouTuber, and he says, "Hey man, people want to buy there, and you're their trusted source. You don't need to
Wow.
be the guy, but you should refer to a trusted source of yours, like a realtor, and take a
Yep.
percentage of the commission. That's a business." Dude,
Smart.
I have dozens of people that have sent me their email address to connect them to my realtor, and
Mhm.
I've had two people already that have, this is in like the last month, that are closing on property, and I'll get a cut of that commission for doing nothing other than
Amazing.
posting every day and making right. But I've got dozens in my inbox that I haven't sent over to my realtor. Don't know why. It's simple.
Mm.
Go in, copy, paste, send, copy, paste, send.
Yeah.
But it's like, wait a minute, it's actually working. It's
Yes.
actually happening.
Yes.
And I know it's not just like, well, we'll see. Because like two people out of the first 40 or 30 that I've sent to them, I probably have 80 of them sitting there, right?
Right.
Like 30 or 40 I've sent to them. Two people so far have purchased and are closing on units, and I'll get a cut of that. It'll pay me
Wow.
in the $10,000 to $20,000 range,
Mm.
right?
That's awesome.
But I'm afraid for some reason. I don't even think
Yeah.
I am. Like, I'm not finding the time to simply
Mm.
go in, grab those messages, and make an email connection to this realtor. That's all I got to do. Why?
Mm.
Why? What is my fear?
Uh, the fear of success is so real. I think people call it imposter syndrome, right? It's like
Sure.
almost, so for me, when here I am, broke on my parents' couch. My daughter got us on TikTok. That's what exploded our company, TikTok, actually. We started doing these funny videos together. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm researching macroeconomics. I'm gonna start sharing it. So we explode. So I had this weird paradigm. Like, I'm broke on my parents' couch for the moment in time. And I'm teaching people macroeconomics and what I'm doing about it. I did Gary Vay's strategy. I started flipping free stuff, started investing in crypto, blah, blah, blah. So I turned nothing out of something, or nothing into something.
Into something. Yep.
And so I went through this process, and then all of a sudden thousands of people started coming, same thing, for coaching. They're like, oh my gosh, why don't you start an academy? And I started academy, and it blew up in 2020. And I'm still on my parents' couch at this point. And then I transitioned into an apartment. Like, oh, I'm moving into an apartment. They're going to think this. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're not thinking anything. Like, I'm thinking this. I'm
Yeah.
thinking this. They're the ones following me. They're the ones sending me referrals. They're the ones joining my academy.
I get the
They
same
believe in
feeling.
what I'm doing. And it was like, so what I started doing is I just, so from what it's people, the fear of success stops so many people. It's the fear of maintaining it. That's what the fear is. It's like, once you get there, can I maintain it? Absolutely, you can. Absolutely, you can. And that's why people love jobs. They love jobs because it's secure, a paycheck every other Friday. But
Oh, that's a great point.
how
Yeah.
many people have been laid off from their secure job, though? Right? There is no real security other than you. That's what
Mm,
I tell people. And I tell people all the time, I'm the richest man in the world, because if all this went away, I'm still the exact same person. I could rebuild. And when I finally adopted that in my own subconscious programming and my conscious awareness, that no matter what happens, the ecosystem that I built, the people, places, things, the environment, connections with you, like, think about it. We're connecting on this podcast. Now our networks are connecting together.
yeah.
If something happened, we could all come together and build. Like, that's what we built within our ecosystem. It's like, we always say we can win at anything. And when you start to think that way, it just, that's Bob Proctor's vacuum. You're pulling life to you. Now opportunities come to me. Like, the insurance thing fell in my lap last year. I'd been referring, same thing. I had been referring insurance for 3 years. I use IUL, but I've been referring it. I've been using it for my wealth strategy, and I've been referring it for 3 years, and I didn't even know I could get commission. I had no idea. And then I got licensed. Someone's like, you can get licensed. And we got licensed. And because it scared the shit out of me, I got licensed, and then we started getting thousands of appointments. I mean, so now I have a big insurance team and all this stuff. And I'm like, sometimes I still fear our growth. It's one of our fastest growing companies right now. And I'm like, can we maintain this? Absolutely we can. And it's the fear of the unknown. I think everybody fears that. It's the fear of the unknown. But there is no unknown. It's you. It's you. There is no unknown. It's how do I explain this? When I finally figured this out, that my thoughts of today, so I always say what you believe in your heart, you think in your mind, will eventually become your words and become your reality. If you can see it in your mind, eventually you can hold it right here in your hands. What you repeatedly do gets ingrained in your subconscious mind. It becomes your unconscious activity. So now unconsciously, because I rewired my brain, I will always be successful. It's just part of my DNA now. It's, in my opinion, it's part of what I do now. I will win at everything I do. And that sounds arrogant, but it's because it's in here I'm winning, right? So
Yeah.
everything I do, I will win. But the old self would be like, the old broken little boy was like, oh, see, you lost everything when you left corporate. What if that happened? It's not going to happen again. It's not.
Yeah, that's
And
funny.
if it does, I
I'm
can
staring
rebuild.
blankly at you because there's like 6 different things
You
going
know?
through my mind right now. First, I'll try to unpack this without being too verbose. First is, it's funny you mentioned about you were doing comedy videos on TikTok. I know this is like sounds like you went way deeper than this. I'll bring it back there, I promise. But I've talked about I did the same observational comedy down here, throwing it on Instagram about just like culturally
Mhm.
some funny stuff that I see here, like things all Dominicans do, and then folks that follow me from the states that have Dominican roots or Latin American roots, I think it's hilarious. Blew up
Yeah.
my platform, and then once they're in, they're seeing my knowledge as I talk about.
Mhm.
This is a great community to invest in. Oh, I wouldn't go there. I would go here. This, that, and the
Yeah.
other. Right. So like that
Yep.
comedy piece, it draws me in. What you just so taking that, what else also was going through my mind was the concept of principles. And I was thinking about these different principles that I need to embody. So your point about rewiring your brain and anchoring in this idea that you're going to, I forget what you just said, but they're grounded in your principles,
Mhm.
in peace, in family structure, in freedom. So I just wrote down 3 words for me that I would maybe the beginnings of what I see as principles, which are service, fun, and family. Like service,
Beautiful.
fun, and family. Those are
Beautiful.
principles that I think they just feel easy to me.
Yeah.
And when I think about this glut of people in my inbox that are looking for a connection to this realtor,
Yeah.
I'm against my principle of service
Service.
by,
Yes.
by
Yes.
not, right? So it's like, now I'm feeling like anxious to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
and clear the inbox and send all
Yes.
this stuff because I want to realign with a principle that I just wrote down of service.
Yes, I just got chills on my body, confirmation. Okay, so that's what gut feeling is. You just
Yeah.
get it. So when you're a principal, you just nailed it. You just explained it so beautifully. You wrote down your principles in the last 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
Then you thought about your inbox and you got a gut feeling.
Mm,
That's what we should be operating from, is our gut.
that's
That
amazing.
the uh-huh or uh-uh. So for me, to train the uh-huh or uh-uh is off my principles.
Yeah.
So, like, when somebody came to me and said, "You should get license insurance," it was, "Uh-huh," and I
Mm,
got licensed, and boom, it was like, holy crap. I no longer was creating companies to make money and ego. I was creating companies because it was in alignment with my principles.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like, it's that uh-huh and uh-uh. That's,
Peace, freedom, family structure. I love that, man. That's really, really interesting.
and from
Fascinating.
there, the
Yeah.
company we're creating, like it, we're building six-figure earners. They're like, it's developing peace, freedom, and family structure for them as well. So not only do my principles are in line, so everybody, I work with, I always encourage them, like, you got to have principles, especially if you're going to work for me. It's like, because or you need to know my principles. So when you make a decision for our company, you have to you have to be able to measure. If you come to me with an idea or a business partnership, you have to already measure whether it's an integrity. Can you measure their honesty? And will they disrupt my belief system? And I don't mean, like, my CFO is Buddhist. I believe in God, and Jesus and Buddha are pretty similar, but more similar than they are apart. But we coexist together. It's not like he's like, you can't talk about Jesus. Like, it's like, my point behind that is, like, when I was in corporate, they said you couldn't talk about politics and
Yeah.
religion. In mine, you can talk about whatever the hell you want.
Mm,
Be you, man. If you're left, cool, whatever, do your thing, man. If you're right, do your thing. Like, they're like, I'm always talking about God and Jesus, so you can talk about whatever you want. Why can't you talk about whatever you want, right? Just, we always say what you mean, don't say it mean. and don't be disrespecting other people's belief systems. Like,
Mhm.
let people believe what they believe and have a healthy conversation. And we've grown like crazy like that because everybody feels comfortable being them, right? It's like, hey, listen, and ironically, we're all attracting the same type of people with the same principles, morals, and ethics because it's
Right.
frequency, right?
Oh man, that's bringing it home. I
Yeah,
love that, man. What a great discussion. What a great discussion. I didn't know that we go this long on it, but that's on me because I really got into
I
that. That
love
was a
it.
lot of fun to talk through, and it conjured up some things that really helped me. So I appreciate you walking through that. You want to do some macroeconomic stuff for a few minutes? I have a couple questions.
Let's do it, man. That's my favorite.
Is so BRICS. Well, let me take it a step back.
Yeah, cool.
I live in DR, like I mentioned, and I had a guy named Andrew Bustamante on this podcast, former
Oh, he's
CIA
great.
spy, great,
Yeah,
great
he's
guy, and
great.
he did it on Stephen Bartlett recently. He said to me, "You need to leave the U.S. in 7 years." That's what he said to me on
Mhm.
Stephen Bartlett. It's my thumbnail on the video, 250,000 views on that interview, and then he goes on Stephen Bartlett, and Stephen Bartlett's thumbnail says, "Leave the U.S. by 2030." Same idea, right? He's talking about this, leave the U.S. Um, we talked about me getting a second passport here. And he's like, yes. He's like, I don't
Mm,
care where you get a second passport because God knows it's coming. He believes within the next 7 years, China and the US achieve parity. BRICS, for those that understand what it is
yeah,
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Those countries have aligned around essentially the idea of replacing the US dollar
correct.
as they're competing with the G7, right? So they're saying, hey, the G7 is what they are. We want to establish another currency, another outlet, all of that stuff. I'm probably
Mhm.
describing that terribly.
No,
Is
perfect.
there risk in the near future, do you believe, in the next 5 to 7 years
Mm,
of BRICS overtaking the G7?
100%. Well, here's why, and I'll
100% there's risk or 100% they
There's
will?
risk, 100% well, there's risk. I don't know if they will. This presidential election will be very, very important, how things go for America. This is the most historical presidential election in human history, right? So I'll just explain the facts, figures, numbers, logic that I know and how I'm planning for it. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then 5 nations joined as well. The UAE is teaming up. The UAE is teaming up with them as well. So their whole goal is to de-dollarize from the American dollar. And even in the Putin and Tucker Carlson interview, he was like, "Man, you're creating boogeymen. What are you guys doing? Like, so what? So when to go back just a little bit, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Biden's first thing was to take them off the SWIFT system, right?
Yeah.
So the sanction, he just put just recently, about a month ago, he put 5 more sanctions on them financially, and they're like, screw you guys. And so
It's big.
the problem is that we're weaponizing the dollar, and so a lot of people don't realize. I'm proud of. Sorry about that. I'm
That's
proud to
okay.
be. We still there?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. I'm proud to be an American. I'm super proud to be American. I serve my country, and so, but you can't be foolish. You got to pay attention
Right,
to what's
right.
happening right now.
Yeah.
So what's happening right now is basically the American dollar has been they're weaponizing it against other countries, right? And so we're in this weird parallel right now where America's at 120% debt to income ratio. We have more debt than we have money in the system, right? Our taxes are just going to pay the debt. We got downgraded from AAA to AA plus as a country, so it
Yeah.
cost us more money to borrow from other countries. Most of our debt is held outside, a portion of our debt's held outside the United States by China, and I think it's Japan. And
Mhm.
so basically, what we're doing, and every single dollar is someone else's debt in America. And we're in this weird environment where it's like we just have to keep raising the debt ceiling, keep raising the debt ceiling. And other countries are noticing this. They're like, there's a problem here. And then I'll go all the way back to 2009, right? So that's when I went into banking, is 2007 to 2008, after the housing collapse. So Brazil, Russia, India, and China and South Africa formed BRICS in 2009, which is ironic with the Bitcoin inception at the same exact time.
Oh,
I
is
don't
that
know.
right?
I don't
Yeah.
know if there's a connection there, but I think there might be some sort of connection there. But think about this. You're in Russia or China, and you're watching America collapse their financial system. I went into banking after that. There was people that had no income that had $1 million homes.
Mm,
Who the hell was regulating this? So the
mhm.
other countries are like, wait a minute, you guys are the dominant currency and you aren't even regulating your banks. They're like, so they were like, we need to form together. This has been going on for a long time. So in
Yeah.
2009, they created BRICS. And then 2012 was pivotal, really pivotal. And a lot of people don't pay attention to this. From 2012, and we're 12 years later exactly. In 2012, they created the FOMC, which is the Future Oversight Committee, to regulate non-bank financial institutions, things that we're experiencing now. Everybody's kind of moving away from banks, traditional banks. They created the Bank Bail-In Committee, which is different than Bank Bailout in 2012. And Obama turned the printing machine on full blast with the
Mhm.
rescue plan, right? So Now here we are in well, let's go back to 2023. We now have the bank bailing committee got activated. The FOMC got activated. So they've been planning this for a very, very long time. I believe that the pandemic was the shock to the system to move us from an old analog banking system to a digital banking system, right? They shocked the system. They're like, okay, let's see how far we can push people, how much they'll use technology, get them used to the technology, get them used to using ATMs, telebankers, all this stuff. The banks, one of the things I'll share with people, the banks in the banking system, they have to switch an old analog system. It has to be changed, right? It can't operate because you have the new messaging system, ISO. You can't
Mhm.
operate one, they have to move together, right? So that's one thing. But with Brazil, Russia, and China and South Africa, like they are working to de-dollarize. Like they're and people are like, there's no way the dollar is going to collapse. I don't know if it'll collapse. What I think is going to happen, this is just my opinion, is that we're going to move into a bag of currencies. So you have the G7, you'll have the BRICS, and then they're going to regulate currencies through a bag of currencies versus dominant one currency. That's what I believe is going to happen. President Trump said it 7 years ago. He said we're moving into an even playing field, right?
Yeah.
And now all of
Yeah.
a sudden he's bullish on crypto. So he said we're moving into an even playing field. So I think what's going to happen is because of digitization of money, it's really hard to have the dollar as a dominant currency because you and I can transact without a bank now. So if
Yeah.
you and I can transact without a bank, they're walking this delicate tightrope of losing absolute control of the central banks are at this delicate tightrope of losing control of the monetary system, right? So what they're trying to do is they fudded us all out of cryptocurrency, and now they're like, oh, cryptocurrency, the ETF, and all this stuff. And first they resist it, then they
Yeah.
sue it, then they regulate it, then they join it. So now
Mm.
we're in regulation and joining phase. So I do agree with him in the next I've been saying that since 2030, our whole system is going to be completely different. So what I've been doing is using the speculative asset called crypto to gain a large amount of money in a short amount of time. And I pull profits when everybody's coming in, I'm exiting the markets and I put mine into insurance. I put it into, I call it tier one capital, bottom of the risk pyramid. And then I borrow from my assets tax free when it comes back down. So what I believe is happening is a transition in a monetary system, right? I believe what happens when everybody's screwed financially. We found out China, Evergrande, Russia's Ruby started to collapse last year. They had to raise interest rates. Everybody's in a bad position financially. So we go to war, right? So we're going into World War III. And then after World War II, what did we had? We had innovation.
Mhm.
America became the dominant currency.
Yeah.
And it's so here we are. I highly recommend everybody study Ray Dalio's content. Ray Dalio, The Changing World Order. It is
Yeah.
so unbelievably accurate. He studied 500 years back, and we are actually, it's to the T. We have large debts, internal conflict, weak leadership, a change in reserve currency. And what was the other one? Oh, Civil War and Revolution, the left going against the right. And so 2024 for everybody is the most polarizing year we're ever going to have. It's like,
What
um,
has to happen? Trump need to be
man,
reelected?
yeah, for things to change, yeah, 100%. Financially, he'll be a lot better for our country, right?
Agreed.
And it goes,
Yeah.
yeah, financial much better for our country. Then you got, yeah, I just financially, yeah, I'm not going to get into the
I
politics
love the
part.
feeling out on any time he's mentioned, right? I don't even wanna say his name because YouTube is gonna shadow ban this video,
Yeah,
but,
that's what I'm saying, yeah, I kinda
right?
keep yeah, it's just like for me, I guess so this is what in 2020, I was I'll just be transparent. I got
Please.
really deep into the conspiracy stuff. I was like, "Oh, Trump's coming back. He's gonna jump out of a bush and arrest everybody," and all that shit. I was one of those people. And then I finally realized that wasn't doing shit for my finances. It
Yeah.
wasn't doing anything. It was actually messing my platform up. It was messing me up. I was wrong on everything I predicted about Trump, blah, blah, blah. And so what I started doing, I'm like, "Okay, wait a minute. How can I get my shit together?" Right? So, like you said, develop principles, morals, ethics, start creating, using their destruction. Because the good news about this, if there is any good news, the greatest wealth is built during these times.
Yeah.
The more volatility, the better. And so, if people can really take a deep breath, one thing people need to do is they need to get financial literacy
Mm.
in America. My God, people have, and that's why I'm on this platform. I'm like, financial literacy. You got to understand what the Federal Reserve is. You got to understand what money is. You got to understand what debt is, right? And we're all using debt incorrectly in America. We're
Mm.
borrowing against our future self. People don't realize like the consumer credit index is an all-time high. Credit cards,
Mhm.
there's still a lot of room left on credit cards, but when the banks start to collapse, they'll lower that. They'll start cutting off your supply, right?
Yeah.
So we're in this delicate balance. So talking about crypto specifically, we have the Bitcoin halving coming in April 20th, I think it is. That's going to reduce the supply in half.
Mhm.
right? Or the amount that can be mined in half. And then we have interest rates. He said he was going to lower, they priced in but I don't think he's going to lower
Drops, yeah.
interest rates till he gets closer to the election. And when he does that, crypto stocks are going to go through the roof, like skyrocket. So I'm always telling people, pull profits, pull profits.
Mm,
People, like, if you're in crypto and you think crypto is going to make you rich, you're not rich unless you pull profits.
mm.
Right. And then what do you do
Yeah.
with that money? It's really important that people diversify. I think that's really important because we're so indoctrinated to go to school, get a job, have a 401k, maybe a Roth IRA. And we're like, we got a business, cryptocurrency. Like, it's like you got to diversify. Right. So for me, I move things from the risk pyramid going up down to the bottom of the foundation, which is like insurance is one of the most foundational things for building wealth. So
You're
I
talking
move
about what do you call it? A policy, infinite banking type policy,
Yeah,
correct?
I use IUL personally, yeah. So, and you can use VULs, which is attached to the market. You can use, there's different whole life policies or cash policies, right? They're not retirement vehicles. You got to make that
Right.
very clear. They're the ability, because of it's not called 77028. There's a tax code that was created in 1913 that allows people to use insurance and borrow from it tax free, right?
Mm.
And ironically, that tax code was created in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created. I don't know. So,
Hmm.
so for
Interesting.
insurance, people are like, well, what if they change the rules with insurance? If they change the rules with insurance, they're changing it to benefit them
Yeah.
because all banks, you just look up how much insurance Bank of America holds, how much Chase holds. The banks are insured big
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
right? And so I insure my family, not only my family for death, but also my wealth. So I actually put insurance on my money. So
Amazing. Wow, we could go looking at the time. We could go down a whole rabbit hole on this, but I think we're gonna leave it there. Um, where could people learn more? Where do you want to direct folks if they wanted to learn more about you, work with you? Where would you push folks at this point?
yeah, absolutely. The best thing is if you go into Google, type in Coach JV, like Junior Varsity, or 3T Warrior Academy, all our content will come up. We have a YouTube channel. We have tons of free content. I always tell people, access the free content. I got a free book that's on my YouTube channel. It's all 3T Warrior Academy. Because we're trying to get this information to as many human beings as possible. Like, all I'm speaking from is my current paradigm,
Mm,
like how I went from broke on my parents' couch to now building generational wealth. What I'll tell everybody is it's possible for you. It's apps. If I can do it, you can do it.
yeah.
That's why I tell my true story, because I want people to see themselves in my story. Whether you're like in corporate America and you're like, you have that fear of failure.
Mhm.
What I will tell you is there's 100% chance. There's three things that are going to happen that are guaranteed. You're going to die, pay taxes. Well, maybe not Dominican Republic, maybe pay taxes, pay taxes.
Big
Yeah, maybe,
taxes here. Yeah.
maybe okay. But die, pay taxes, and you're going to fail.
Yeah.
It's just part of the process, man. And once you start to fall in love with the failures and understand that the sun comes up every single day, man. And so are you. And so are you. Like, if I can go from suicide to financially free, spiritually free, mentally free, you can do it. Just remember the difference between the guy in the crack house buying drugs with a 3-year-old daughter, to the guy sitting in the garden in Peru, was energy and frequency and a belief system.
Yeah.
And that takes, it's a subconscious, you have to like a child from birth to 8 is a program. You're programming them, right? You almost have to get in that childlike state of mind and figure out, like, what is holding you back, what fears, anxiety, and then rewire those,
Mm.
right? And it takes a while, right? It takes a while to rewire that stuff. You have to be disciplined and consistent for a long enough period of time to access a new frequency.
I love the affirmations, though. I think that was something that changed my life at some point too. I had 9 of them. I can't even remember them now. I don't say them now, and I really should revisit them because I think they would serve me even in this era of my life where I do feel more complete. I do feel like I'm more confident in who I am and so on. But I had these 9. I'd say them every day for about, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, something like that. I could probably, if I started to sit down, I'd get into momentum and be able to
Yeah.
say them. But it's a great reminder that that's a great way to go about it. So. JV, man, I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for
Yeah.
jumping on today.
Of course. Thank you, brother.